Adanna Okoye moved through the Alabo household like the morning breeze, essential but unseen. At 23, she had become fluent in silence. Each day began before dawn, boiling oats, ironing Daniel and Zara's school uniforms, scrubbing toilets, and praying the inverter wouldn't fail again. Her mother, Mama Ozioma, lay sick in a faraway village, relying on Adanna's monthly salary for insulin and basic food. The Alabo duplex, nestled in an upscale estate in Worcester, was all polished marble and imported art. But inside, the atmosphere was stiff with tension and unsaid truths. Mrs. Eunice Alabo, a no-nonsense microfinance CEO, left before sunrise and returned after dark. She barely spoke to Adanna except to correct or command. Her husband, Mr. Alabo, worked from home. He claimed he managed a tech startup, but mostly lounged in polo shirts with a drink in hand, scrolling on his iPad. His eyes lingered too long when Adanna passed. At first she told herself it was harmless. Maybe he respected her work ethic. Maybe he saw her as a younger sister. But one day as she bent to mop behind the bookshelf, his voice slithered into the silence. "You bend like a reed, Adanna, so smooth, so elegant." Her hand froze mid-scrub. He stepped closer. "You're too fine to be a maid. Someone like you deserves more." Her heart pounded. She stood slowly, gathered her rag, and walked away, refusing to respond. But inside, her spirit shook. From that day, she avoided him, no more eye contact, no more silence in the same room. Still, he found ways to corner her. "My phone charger isn't working, Adanna. There's a stain in the study drawer." She stayed alert, tied her wrapper higher, avoided the study when she could, but her fear deepened every time he passed her in the hallway with a smirk. The same man who mocked her cooking in front of his wife would whisper obscenities when they were alone. The double life terrified her. What hurt most was Eunice's blind trust. "My Alabo may be idle, but he's loyal. He can't stand other women near him." Adanna heard it as she dished their egusi soup one night. The spoon almost slipped from her hand. That evening, she sat on her narrow mattress in the servants' quarters, trying not to cry too loud. "If I speak, I lose everything. But if I stay silent, what more will he take from me?" She thought of Mama Ozioma's swollen legs and empty medicine box. She thought of the money she'd been saving for her mother's next appointment. "Silence protects no one," she whispered to herself. But still, she kept it tucked beneath her breath, behind every "yes, ma," every "good morning, sir." Not knowing the silence she carried would soon explode and change her life forever. The tension in the Alabo household grew like a heavy storm cloud. Adanna could feel it in the air in Mr. Alabo's lingering stares, in his footsteps behind her, and in her own tightening chest every time she passed the study door. She moved faster, spoke less, prayed more. But nothing prepared her for the trap he laid. It was an ordinary Thursday morning. The children had gone to school. Mrs. Eunice had left early for a banking conference in Maitama. Adanna, as usual, swept the living room, humming a quiet hymn, when Mr. Alabo called from upstairs. "Adanna, there's a spill in my drawer. Come clean it." Her feet froze. Her heart started racing. Every part of her wanted to ignore him. But he was the Oga of the house. Refusing a direct order could cost her everything. With trembling hands, she climbed the stairs and entered the study. He was behind the desk, pretending to type. "It's the bottom drawer," he said without looking up. She crouched, opened it empty. "There's nothing spilled here, sir," she said softly. When she turned, he was no longer at the desk. He stood right behind her, eyes dark, breath heavy. "You don't have to be scared. No one is here." His hand reached toward her. Adanna stood abruptly. "Please respect yourself, sir." But he only smiled. "I like fire. It means you'll be fun." Her voice shook. "If you touch me, I will tell your wife." That made him laugh, a quiet, cruel laugh. "You think she'll believe you? A maid? Against her husband?" His words hit like knives. "I will destroy your name, Adanna. I'll say you've been seducing me. Who do you think she'll believe?" Tears burned behind her eyes, but she didn't cry. She backed away, lips tight, hands clenched, and fled the room. That evening, she said nothing. She couldn't. The words were too dangerous. She cooked stew. She bathed the children. She folded laundry with trembling fingers. But the next morning, everything fell apart. As she entered the living room with a tray of pap and akara, she froze. Mrs. Eunice Alebo was home early, sitting stiffly on the couch, arms folded. Mr. Alebo stood beside her with a pained expression. A performance. "Adanna," he began, "I didn't want to say this, but my conscience won't let me stay silent. She's been trying to seduce me, wearing tight wrappers, bending over on purpose, whispering things. I've kept quiet, but it's getting worse." Adanna's tray dropped. "That's a lie!" Mrs. Eunice shot up. "Shut your mouth! How dare you talk back?" "Madam, please. He's been the one." "Enough!" her voice thundered. "I know my husband. He would never stoop so low. You're just an ungrateful thing. I trusted you in my home, fed you, paid you, and this is how you repay us?" Adanna fell to her knees. "Please, I beg you, I have no one. My mother is sick. Don't throw me out." But Mrs. Alebo had already called the guards. "Drag this harlot out of my house. I don't want to see her face again." Mr. Alebo watched silently, victorious. The guards yanked Adanna to her feet, pulled her wrapper from the floor, and marched her outside like a thief. Her travel bag was tossed out behind her. The gate slammed shut. And just like that, 10 months of labor, trust, and quiet sacrifice were erased. Adanna stood barefoot on the curb of Woos II. Her lips trembled. Her ears still rang with the words, "Take your shame and go." But it wasn't shame she carried, it was grief. Grief for the truth silenced. Grief for the dignity stolen. Grief for the mother she might never save now. And the question that broke her most, where will I go now? The gate of the Alebo residence slammed shut behind Adanna like a final sentence. She stood alone in the chill of early morning, clutching her threadbare bag, the hard pavement biting into her bare feet. The sky above Woos II was a dull gray. Commuters sped past in air-conditioned cars. No one saw the girl frozen at the edge of the estate, her dignity scattered like dust. She tried to walk, but her legs felt numb. Each step reminded her of how little she had left: no salary, no shelter, no strength. She thought of Mama Ozioma, probably awake already, expecting a call, a transfer, a promise. What would she say? How would she explain that a lie had ended everything? Adanna wandered the streets in a daze, asking herself the same question over and over. Where do I sleep tonight? She approached a roadside kiosk. The woman sweeping the front eyed her suspiciously. Auntie, beg, can I sit here till morning? No space here, go and find your people. My people. She had no one in Abuja. As the sun began to set, she found an abandoned shop near Wuse Market, its shutters half closed, the smell of rust and urine thick in the air. But it was dry, and dry was enough. She sank to the floor, wrapping her scarf tightly around her. Tears came real and raw. For the first time since the incident, she cried loudly, not the silent kind she used to bury in her pillow. These were wails of a woman pushed beyond breaking. She wept for her mother, for her lost job, for the injustice she couldn't fight. She cried until her body gave up. And then, nothing. The night dragged on. Trucks roared by. Rats scurried near her feet. A distant radio played a gospel song, its message cruel in contrast. You are the head and not the tail. By dawn, she was numb. She stood up slowly, her body aching from the cold concrete. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. Her stomach groaned, empty since the morning before. Still, she walked. Just keep moving. That voice inside her, faint but firm, kept whispering. She passed shop signs and rushing commuters. She followed the road toward Area 11, hoping for a miracle, a conductor's pity, a stranger's kindness, anything. But as she reached the junction, her vision blurred. Her head spun. And she didn't see the SUV until it screeched to a halt just inches away. Hey, are you mad? A tall man in a crisp white shirt jumped out, furious. Adanna staggered back, dazed, breathless. Do you want to die? What were you thinking? She couldn't answer. Her lips trembled. Her hands shook. She barely looked up until she heard the man's tone change. Wait, he said softly, stepping closer. His eyes scanned her dusty scarf, her swollen eyes, her raw palms clutching a faded bag. Are you okay? Adanna's voice cracked, barely a whisper. No, I'm not okay. And just like that, the first kindness touched her. The man Elijah Denjuma, a man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom or a government office, crouched down in the Lagos dust and said gently, Come, let me get you water. You look like you haven't rested in days. Adanna hesitated. Her body screamed for help, but her mind remembered Mr. Alebo. Men couldn't be trusted, especially men in power. Still, Elijah didn't force her. He simply waited. After a long moment, Adanna gave a small nod. She followed him down the road to a quiet cafe that was just opening. He ordered hot tea and bottled water, never taking his eyes off her. What's your name? He asked. Adanna. He smiled gently. A beautiful name, but your eyes carry a storm. And in that cafe, as the city came to life around her, Adanna began to tell her story slowly, painfully, truthfully. And Elijah just listened. Adanna's voice trembled as she spoke. Her fingers wrapped around the warm teacup like it was the last piece of comfort left in the world. She told Elijah everything: the months of quiet labor, the harassment, the fear, the betrayal, the moment she was dragged out like trash. Not once did he interrupt. He simply listened, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable, like a man weighing each word like gold. When she finally finished, she lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. I've talked too much. I don't even know you. Elijah leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. You haven't said too much. You've carried too much. There's a difference. The cafe buzzed softly around them, vendors setting up, spoons clinking, chairs scraping, but in that small corner, everything was still. Adanna hesitated. She didn't trust easily, not anymore. But there was something in Elijah's presence that didn't ask for anything. It offered peace and waited. Why are you helping me? She asked finally. He paused, then replied simply, Because once I needed help too, and someone gave it to me. Adanna stared, unsure. Was it pity? A game? A setup? Elijah reached into his wallet and pulled out an ID card. Elijah Denjuma, director of Zaya Group, and yes, he lowered his voice, the president is my father. Adanna froze, her stomach twisted. You're the president's son? He smiled modestly. Just a man today. One who saw someone hurting and couldn't walk away. Her throat closed. Everything about this felt surreal. I have a home not far from here, Elijah said. A safe place. There's a woman there, Mama Rejoice. She's like a mother to me. She can take care of you today, feed you, let you rest. I'll stay out of the way if you prefer. Adanna flinched at the offer. It sounded too familiar. Too much like Mr. Alebo's sweet beginnings. No offense, sir, but I can't go to a strange man's house. Elijah nodded. Wise choice, and you're right to be cautious. He pulled out his phone. Let me call Mama Rejoice. You'll go with her. I'll stay here. 15 minutes later, an elderly woman with kind eyes and a strong Igbo accent arrived in a white Hilux. She looked Adanna over like a mother scanning a wounded child. Come, NWAM, you're safe with me. Adanna still hesitated. Then she looked at Elijah standing quietly in the background, arms folded, eyes full of nothing but concern. She nodded slowly. The ride to Elijah's mansion in Socorro was quiet. The compound was vast, serene, surrounded by jacaranda trees and tall white walls. No loud music, no chaos, just calm. Inside, Mama Rejoice led her to a guest room large, bright, filled with the scent of lavender. A robe and towel sat on the bed. Bathe. Food go wait you downstairs. And don't worry, this house is full of light. Adanna stepped into the marble-tiled bathroom and locked the door. She stared at herself in the mirror, dusty hair, swollen face, dirt-streaked arms. Then slowly she peeled off her clothes and stepped into the warm water. And broke! She cried, not the cries of fear, but of release. The sobs of a girl whose pain had found a drain. When she emerged, dressed in a soft wrapper and clean slippers, a plate of jollof rice and fried plantain waited for her downstairs. She ate in silence, barely believing this wasn't a dream. That evening, as the rain began to fall gently outside the tall windows, a knock came at the guest room door. Elijah stood there, a soft smile on his face. Can I come in? She nodded. He sat by the window not too close and spoke calmly. I didn't want to tell you who I was earlier because I didn't want that to define what I offered. You didn't need a prince. You needed a person. Adanna blinked, stunned. You helped me without asking anything. He looked at her, steady. Because that's what real help is. He rose slowly, then paused at the door. Rest tonight, Adanna. Tomorrow we begin again. And as he left, something inside her shifted. It wasn't trust, not yet. But maybe, just maybe, the dawn was coming. Morning sunlight spilled across the room like golden threads. For the first time in weeks, Adanna woke not to harsh voices or the sound of alarm bells, but to silence, peaceful, healing silence. The room smelled of roses and clean linen. She lay still for a moment, taking in the comfort, the safety. Then came a knock. Mama Rejoice entered, carrying a tray of boiled yam, egg sauce, and warm cocoa. You slept like a child, she said with a gentle smile. Adanna sat up slowly. I did, Mama, for the first time in a long time. After breakfast, Mama Rejoice handed her a neatly folded peach dress and helped tie her hair back. Oga Elijah is waiting for you in the study. He say you should come when you're ready. With hesitant steps, Adanna descended the polished staircase. Her palms were sweaty, her heart unsure. She still didn't understand why this stranger, a man of wealth and power, had opened his home to someone like her. Elijah stood at the window, dressed in a navy blue shirt, arms crossed, his silhouette lit by the soft morning glow. He turned and smiled. Morning, Adanna. Good morning, sir. Just Elijah, he said. Please sit. On the table was a black folder. He placed it gently in front of her. Open it. Adanna did. Her eyes widened. On the first page was her name, Adanna's Table Catering Services, a certificate of business name registration. She blinked. What is this? Turn the page, Elijah said softly. The second page, a stamped bank document, an account in her name, seated with N80 million. The third, a lease agreement for a small property in Jahi, perfect for a food business. Tears blurred her vision. I don't understand. I only told you yesterday that I love cooking, that I used to dream about owning a place. That was enough, he said. I believe in planting seeds while the soil is still wet with tears. She tried to speak, but the words died on her lips. Elijah leaned forward. There's more. You'll have a business consultant for 3 months. She'll help with menu design, operations, and hiring. You'll be ready to launch in 6 weeks. Adanna covered her mouth with her hand, tears streaming down. No one's ever believed in me like this. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black velvet box. One more thing. Inside was a simple silver pendant, a dove in mid-flight. It's a reminder, he said, fastening it gently around her neck, that you're not just surviving anymore. You're soaring. Adanna sobbed openly now, not from grief, but from overwhelming gratitude. He didn't reach out. He didn't touch her. He just sat with her. As a man who had given her more than safety, he had given her identity. When she finally composed herself, she looked at him and whispered, Why me? Elijah looked away, then back at her with a quiet smile. Years ago, I hit rock bottom. A woman not wealthy, not famous, saw past my brokenness and gave me a second chance. She didn't care who I was. She just believed I deserved to live. I made her a promise that day. If I ever saw someone standing where I once stood, I'd do the same. Adanna clutched the pendant. I don't know how to repay you. You will, he said gently. Someday, you'll find someone who's lost and afraid, and you'll do for them what I did for you. He stood, giving her space. The driver will take you to see your new shop tomorrow. I'll be away for a few weeks' work calls, but remember, this is just the beginning. And with that, he walked out of the room. Adanna sat in silence, the folder still in her lap, the dove resting over her heart. For the first time in her life, she believed in a future that was hers to create. 3 weeks later, the once-forgotten maid from Worcester II stood proudly in front of a small but freshly painted shop in Yahai. Above the door, a new sign gleamed under the Abuja sun. Adanna's table, homemade goodness, heart-made dreams. She touched the silver dove pendant resting on her chest, her daily reminder that her story didn't end on the roadside. It was reborn there. Inside, the scent of fried plantains and spicy jollof filled the air. 2 young girls in matching aprons were wiping down newly delivered tables. Another girl stood by the stove, stirring a pot of pepper stew with intense focus. Each of them had a story similar to Adanna's. Girls discarded by households. Girls shamed and silenced. Girls who had nowhere to go until now. Adanna had made a decision. She wouldn't rise alone. If I survive that fire, she often whispered to herself, then I'll build shelter for others still burning. The catering business started small office lunch orders, event tastings, school deliveries. But Adanna approached every meal like medicine. Food with dignity, food with a name, food with a purpose. Each new day brought purpose and challenge. She learned how to balance ledgers, negotiate pricing, build a menu. Her consultant, a sharp but kind woman named Ifeoma, became like an older sister, guiding her step by step. When Ifeoma asked her, "Why catering?" Adanna had smiled. "Because even when I had nothing, I still cooked. Cooking was the only thing that made me feel like I could give something back." The staff grew all girls who had been wronged by others, but not forgotten by Adanna. On weekends, they held open feeding days, making warm meals for street children in Utako and Nyanya. Sometimes they cooked extra pots, just in case someone like her wandered by. The neighborhood began to notice. People came, not just for the food, but for the story, for the feeling. Adanna received a letter one morning. The envelope was crisp, the paper expensive. There was no sender address, just her name written in steady cursive. Inside was a short note. "By now you've probably seen the news. I told you I'd be watching from afar. You've done more than I imagined, not just building a business, but building people. The dove around your neck isn't just a gift. It's a symbol of flight. When the time is right, I'll return not as a stranger, but as a friend. Until then, keep soaring. Elijah." Adanna pressed the letter to her chest, eyes burning with gratitude. He had disappeared after helping her set up the business. No calls, no updates. But now she understood. He wasn't here to own her success. He had come to spark it and step aside. Not every savior stays. Some only pass through, leaving light behind. That afternoon, as she was locking up, she saw a young girl outside, barefoot, carrying a tray of oranges. Dusty, hesitant, scared. Adanna walked to the door. "Sister," she called softly, "are you hungry?" The girl turned, startled. "Yes, Ma." Adanna smiled. "Come in, you're safe here." And just like that, a new story began. Weeks turned into months. Adanna's table had become more than just a food business. It had become a sanctuary, a place where broken girls found more than work. They found healing, training, and belonging. The tiny shop in Jahi pulsed with quiet hope built from pain, but powered by purpose. Inside, there were no uniforms, only aprons with embroidered quotes. "We rise by lifting others. From fire, we bloom." Adanna became a symbol, not just to her team of young women, but to customers who came for the meals and stayed for the meaning. She was now called Madam A, and people assumed she had always been successful. but they didn't know the story behind her eyes. She never let them forget it either. Every Sunday, she held reflection circles with her staff. No cooking, just stories, healing, sisterhood. The girls opened up about the employers who abused them, the parents who disowned them, the dreams they buried. And every time Adanna would say, "What happened to you is not who you are. It's what you survived." One evening during their weekly community outreach in Utako, a young boy approached Adanna, dirty, limping, and clutching a small plastic bag of torn bread. He stared at the silver dove around her neck. "Auntie, are you an angel?" She knelt to his level. "No, but someone once gave me wings." She fed him, asked for his name, hired a volunteer to trace his relatives. He became the first boy to receive a scholarship through the Adanna Foundation, a new initiative she started quietly, funding education for children in street situations. What began with survival was now blossoming into legacy. Despite all this, a quiet part of her still wondered, where is Elijah? She hadn't seen or heard from him since the letter. She'd searched his name online and saw headlines. President's son opens tech hub in Dubai. Elijah Danjuma launches female entrepreneur grants. He was out there doing good but unreachable. She kept his letter folded neatly in her Bible. His ID card too. A reminder not of romance but of redemption. One rainy afternoon, she sat by the shop window, watching raindrops race down the glass. The pendant rested warmly against her chest. Suddenly, her receptionist came rushing in. "Madam A, someone is outside asking for you." She stood, wiping her hands. As she stepped outside, a familiar figure stood at the gate. A black SUV parked nearby, an umbrella in his hand. Elijah. He was older now, sharper, but the same quiet calm in his eyes. Adanna froze. He stepped closer. "I didn't come to rewrite the past. I came to see the woman you've become." She smiled, teary-eyed. "You came back." He nodded. "You kept flying." They stood there in the soft Abuja rain, not as rescuer and victim, but as two people who had fulfilled a promise. Elijah looked around at the glowing shop windows, the aprons, the girls wiping tables, the aroma of pepper soup in the air. "You built a garden out of ashes." Adanna smiled. "And now I plant hope in others." He handed her a small box. "This is for the next girl you help. Not for her wrist, for her belief." Inside was a new pendant, another silver dove. And Adanna understood. Some gifts were never meant to stay with us. They were meant to be passed on. The sun rose over Jahi like a quiet blessing, casting warm light on the golden lettering outside a newly opened building beside the shop, the Adanna Foundation Center, a place for her to begin again. Inside its lavender-painted walls were 6 small bedrooms, a communal kitchen, and a counseling room with shelves of donated books. It wasn't grand, but it was safe, it was warm, it was real. And it had Adanna's fingerprints on every brick. Every week, new girls walked through its doors. One came after being abandoned by a madam in Garki. Another escaped a violent relative in Mararaba. One had nearly given up before a street girl told her, "Go to that place in Jahi, the woman there understands." And she did. Adanna had become more than a survivor. She had become a torchbearer. Her journey was now a path others could walk without fear. One afternoon, she walked through the foundation's courtyard with Mama Rejoice, who had retired from Elijah's household and now served as the house matron. They watched the girls laughing as they watered a garden of hibiscus and scent leaves behind the building. In the background, Afrobeat's gospel played from a small speaker. It was life. It was full. "You've turned your wound into a well," Mama Rejoice said softly, "and now many will drink from it." Adanna smiled. That was always the goal, not to be the story, but to be the beginning of someone else's. That evening, she sat alone on the veranda, a cup of Zobo in hand, watching the sky bleed into orange. She touched the dove pendant on her chest, still polished, still powerful. Next to her sat a velvet box containing a second dove pendant, the one Elijah had given her to pass on. Then came a knock at the gate. A girl, about 16, thin, ashamed, barefoot, her wrapper torn at the hem. Eyes wide with fear, Adanna stood and walked gently toward her. "What's your name, my dear?" "Ijeoma," she whispered. "Please, I don't have anywhere to go." Adanna opened the gate without hesitation. "You do now." She took Ijeoma's hand and led her inside, gave her food, a bath, a bed, and when the girl awoke the next morning, a small gift box sat on her pillow. Inside it, the silver dove. Later that year, a journalist published a story titled, "From Housemaid to Hope, the Woman Changing Lives in Yahi." The article went viral. Donations poured in, volunteers signed up. A second center opened in Nyanya, then a third in Kuje, each one named after a value: grace, courage, dignity. At the heart of it all was Adanna, no longer the girl who served silently in someone else's home, but a woman who had built her own. One rainy morning, the kind that once spelled sorrow, Adanna walked through her foundation gates, paused, and looked up at the sky. She whispered to herself, "Thank you, Elijah, for stopping that day." And maybe somewhere in the world, Elijah felt it, the quiet echo of a life changed. Because sometimes the most powerful love doesn't end in marriage or romance. It ends in legacy.